Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and I hope all of you are having a fantastic day because we have a great show planned for you. It's been quite a while, obviously, with the holidays. Our correspondent schedule kind of got flipped around, but yeah, it's been a little bit of time and a lot has happened between visits. But joining us today is our regular correspondent, our computer graphics expert, Mr. Dariush Derakhshani. And yeah, we are going to be talking all about really some RTX updates with some Nvidia, of course, really dominating the news cycle. But hey, that's because they just unveiled the RTX 2060, the 2060, and then on top of that, AMD and Nvidia both had some pretty big announcements out at CES this year. So yeah, we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and well, none of these are really ugly because I think all this tech looks so very good. I'm happy with the aesthetics of it all, and I'm happy that Dariush is here to join us to talk about it. So before we get started with that, though, a couple of things, including computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything from the show notes. We'll have any articles, videos, anything that we talk about here on the show today. We can include them right there for you. Super simple, and you can definitely check that out. Also, while you're there, check out the social media contest brought to you by Logitech, and then on top of that, the live video stream, which you can also find at twitch.tv/computeramerica. Go there, hang out with us, chat with us, and just kind of enjoy our presence. So, with that being said, why don't we go ahead and get things started here? So, as I said before, if you are new here, we have correspondents on the show. Each of them have their own area of expertise, and Dariush Derakhshani, coming from a very long background, visual effects, movies, television, cinema, and teaches this by day and enjoys it by night. And so welcome onto the show once again, Dariush Derakhshani. Dariush, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing just dandy. I don't know what it is. Like, it still feels like the holidays. It feels like, I know CES just happened, but I don't know if it's the snow blanketing the country, but it's just kind of, I don't know. It still feels kind of relaxed,
Yeah, it does. It does. We don't have snow over here, but I don't want to let go of the holidays either. And as classes start to ramp up, I'm faced with a cold, harsh reality that I got to go back to work.
And I think the students feel the same thing. But what? They're all there to learn, and we are here to learn, and we're here to, kind of talk about what's been going on. So, as I said before, between here last time and today, CES happened, and a slew of new graphics cards, and really some announcements. And unless I miss my mark, I don't think we included the story. We'll probably go find it right now. But did you pay attention to CES? I mean, just the show as a whole. Did you just kind of keep a finger on it?
Nah, from a distance, maybe, just kind of glancing at it. I've been enjoying my freedom the last couple of weeks from not being at school by doing the thing that I love the most, which is nothing.
I relate to that just a bit too much. Well, then I will be happy to kind of point you in the right direction of, some things that were announced. And before we get started on, because we have a lot to talk about with the RTX 2060, and, some news around that, I wanted to bring up AMD first. And AMD, they actually had some announcements that I was, kind of surprised at. I'm sure if I was paying closer attention to them, I would not be surprised. But we have talked about chip sizes and die sizes here on the show before, right? 10 nanometer, 14, 7, and all that entails. Well, the big news from AMD was that they came out with a processor. Well, actually, they will be coming out with a processor and a graphics card, both on a 7 nanometer chip die, or die set, or however you say it. And that, of course, comes with a slew of performance increase, efficiency, less power draw, squeezing more processes into a single unit. So I just wanted your initial reaction. I mean, obviously the AMD Radeon 7 is what it's going to be called. 7, of course, alluding to the 7 nanometer. This is the graphics card. What do you think about 7 nanometer graphics card and that AMD was able to beat Nvidia to the punch?
Well, I think the smaller die sizes, the more efficiency in the processors is what's really going to push performance. They've sort of, everybody has sort of acknowledged that Moore's Law is dead, which is basically saying that every 18 months, processing power doubles, and we've hit some engineering limits with what current dies can do. So getting things to be smaller and more efficient is the way to go.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to break in there real quick, but just I mean, it's not even just engineering. Just so everyone's clear, like it's laws of physics kind of breaking. Where when you talk about nanometer, I think when you get down to like 3 nanometers, you're talking about the size of like a carbon atom or whatever these things are made out of. Yeah, it's physical barriers.
Yeah, exactly. It can't really be done in this way of doing things. I mean, you're starting to look at quantum computing being the next big thing, but until then, trying to get existing processors to move faster, you just need more efficient pathways, and reducing the die size reduces the amount of power that's needed for chips to function. So that creates an efficiency there. So I think that makes sense. Going with a smaller die will give you better speeds for the same power. Whether Nvidia gets there or AMD gets there, I think notwithstanding, it comes down to performance. And I know that the CEO of Nvidia was sort of poo-pooing what the Radeon 7 will do, which I understand. I welcome AMD's meddling in Nvidia's face, because they sort of did that with Intel, with the Ryzen CPUs, and they sort of reawoke that sort of dormant CPU war. So it'll be nice to see that, especially now that the whole crypto mining bubble has burst. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure on Nvidia right now.
That's a bold claim to make. I know that we have a lot of crypto enthusiasts who listen to the show. So if I get any hate mail, I'll redirect them to you. But whether or not that was a fad or not, the prices have come down.
As far as buying video cards for crypto mining, that's certainly not the same market that it was several months or a year ago. And that that shows in sales numbers. They're not moving as many video cards now because people who are crypto mining don't need more power. Then people who are just dabbling in it, thinking that they're going to get rich quick, no longer need the cards that they bought, thinking that they're going to become billionaires with crypto mining. So so in that way, that bubble certainly for Nvidia has burst. So now it's back to the way it used to be, which is you're buying a video card for video, for your games and stuff like that. So having Radeon come in with a big swing, I think is worthwhile. I've never in my experience, really seen Radeon as the performance leader, but I've always seen them as probably one of the best bangs for your buck that you can get, with really good cards getting into the mid-range of where the NVIDIA cards have been. So I don't know where the Radeon 7 is going to fit into that until we actually see some real-world benchmarking.
Yeah, and that's something that I really wanted to point out, because you mentioned NVIDIA was, you know, kind of poking fun at Radeon or AMD about the Radeon. And, you know, both of them come out with these charts and their bar graphs, you know, left to right, and they show, you know, the top, you know, the card they're showing off is going to be at the top with the biggest bar, I'm sure alluding to some kind of male anatomy. And then all the others are, you know, a little bit shorter and shorter and shorter. And like real world benchmarking makes such a difference compared to the companies who put them out, be it Intel, AMD, NVIDIA. All of their benchmarking, I feel like the tests, and you could probably speak to this because, you know, I'm sure you do benchmarking, but the tests are set up to only to play to the strengths of what the hardware that they're testing, and not exactly real world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Real world is really where we live. The best analogy I can make is I recently bought a Model 3 Tesla, which is rated for 310 miles. But in real actuality, with the weather and my driving habits, because I drive a little bit crazy, I get much lower than 310. You got to expect that. That's definitely going to be the case with video cards, and depending on the games and stuff that you run. But I think one of the monkey wrenches in this whole thing is ray tracing, because I've been saying it for a long time now, and I'd still say ray tracing is really an important step in a video game and how it looks. I mean, that is a really important nut to crack. And the RTX cards start offering that. And I think within the next several years, ray tracing is going to be part of pretty much most of the games that are being put out there. That's not going to be as niche as it is right now. And I think AMD needs to acknowledge that. And I think from what I've read in glancing, they've been a little bit dismissive of ray tracing. But I think hardware acceleration of that is really, really important and is going to be a real big factor. So while I welcome any sort of competition that AMD can give NVIDIA, I really think it needs to be in the ray tracing space.
So ray tracing is one of those things that, and we'll probably do a quick definition of it, you know, just to catch everyone up. But NVIDIA is certainly pushing it. I'm sure Intel's pushing it as well. We saw a lot of, you know, kind of monitors, and we're going to talk about monitors a little bit later. But and the idea that 4K 60 frames per second or 144 frames per second or whatever the new benchmark that people were hoping it would be, this year with the monitors, I'll say that 1440p was kind of the dominant resolution or, you know, form factor. And then I'd say that even ultra wides, you know, a single monitor that would be the dimensions of two side-by-side monitors was even more dominant than 4K. And I don't know if, you know, 4K plus ray tracing plus a good frame rate is just going to be out of most people's price ranges, but ray tracing and, you know, I'm not saying that they're not compatible, but ray tracing seems to be kind of the go-to marketing scheme over 4K. And I found that kind of interesting because as far as TVs go, TVs have had 4K for quite a while now. So
yeah, I would say forget 4K. I mean, the most visual improvement that you're going to get is with a game that's been properly made for ray tracing. Because what ray tracing does is it gives you real looking shadows and real looking reflections. Because right now, a lot of games will use what's called shadow mapping, which is approximating what shadows look like. And they look fine, but you can kind of see they're a little jagged. Real shadows have much more nuance and finesse to them, and they tend to fall off with softness. and a piece of glass throws a completely different shadow than a solid, hunk of wood, for example. Those things are really accounted for in ray tracing algorithms. So shadow, but also reflections and how surfaces look that are glossy or not glossy or matte or diffuse, those are handled so much nicer with ray tracing than with just scanline.
Yeah.
So
and by the
that's
way,
really the place to take it, and that's really where you should benchmark. So 4K is all well and good, but in the end, it's not going to give you nearly the same amount of visual improvement that a really nice ray trace scene would.
Yeah, and by the way,
hands down.
For anyone out there watching the video portion, I decided to look up an example video. This one from Remedy Entertainment, and really they're just going around showing different fabrics, textures, water on the floor, and showing that as the camera shifts, so does the lighting, and the way that it reflects. It doesn't just look like this is the skin it has. No, it's dynamic to the point of view of the person and the lighting and things like that. So yeah, right. Pretty good example. And obviously, like you said, this is what's going to take video games and really make them look a lot better. It's not even about the amount of polygons anymore. It's about ray tracing.
Yeah, it's about what the surfaces look like. Is that plastic? Is it metal? Is it this type of plastic or that type of glass or whatever? That's a really important and subtle distinction that you get much better with ray trace because of the quality of the reflections that you get from it.
Right.
So I think that's really going to have to be the guiding hand with which card performs better. It's not about the resolution that you can drive. I think it's going to end up being the quality, because I would much rather have 1920 by 1080 HD at ray trace quality than having 4K with what we have now.
Right.
Which is shadow mapping and reflection mapping. And that's a perfect example with the Stormtroopers. Right.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite. Where for anyone out there just listening to the radio, it's a video of Stormtroopers. Yes, from Star Wars, Star Wars. Make sure. And kind of as the camera moves around, and you see reflective surfaces. This is it looks. I guess this is the point where it looks like a rendered cinematic, but this is the kind of quality you would get during gameplay. So
yeah, exactly. Almost everything that you see in films and visual effects and is I would say hands down 100% ray traced. I may be wrong. There might be some exceptions to that, but pretty much everything that you've been seeing in the movies are ray tracing.
Right. So, okay, so with that, and I guess the question really comes down to with AMD and this new card and 7, and then real quick, we're going to jump over to the processor because it's the same kind of news. But ray tracing, something that Nvidia is pushing, I'm not sure if that's like a technology thing, or it's just they put more emphasis on like the CUDA cores as they call them. But I'm sure that the Radeon 7 could probably do it. It's just I don't know if it's optimized for it.
Yeah, I think it's just optimizing for that type of code, and whether there's kind of a standard, like the whole OpenCL versus CUDA phenomenon that happened between NVIDIA and AMD. I don't know, but I would think that a standard will be very helpful for the industry. So if that's the case, then Radeon should hopefully be doing it soon. And again, I think AMD may be just stalling for time, or maybe what I read is incorrect or was too long ago, but it seemed like they were kind of brushing off ray tracing as just sort of a gimmick, which, I mean, right now, the amount of support for it puts it in the sort of gimmick category, but it really shouldn't be. Yeah. In the coming year, I would think if you're a game developer and you're doing a Call of Duty type game, you want ray tracing. Period. Yeah. You want it. So you need to have it.
So, but like we've seen that before with with things where let's say 3D VR ready, things that I guess AMD was kind of hoping that these marketing terms were just simply marketing terms. But hey, you're right. You know, this is a shift in how people are going to be viewing these games. And by the way, now we're going to switch over real quick to the processor. AMD shows off a 7 nanometer next gen chips at CES. And by the way, I'm not sure if you watched the keynote, Dariush, but the keynote for, and this is just a fun aside, the CEO for AMD and the CEO of NVIDIA, they're actually related. They're actually a pretty close family. I think the CEO of NVIDIA is the older cousin to, or uncle or something like that, to the CEO of AMD. So, but hey, you know, it's just connections and what have you. But anyway,
yeah, right, runs in the family, right?
Well, I mean, she was hired at NVIDIA, and then AMD poached her, and it's like they were family, but she got her start at NVIDIA. But I digress. So 7 nanometer next chip gen, CES, AMD. This is the Ryzen 3. The Ryzen has been getting very, very good marks for processor. You know, kind of like you said, not you know, trying to compete with Intel and with NVIDIA. Intel always had the clear-cut best of the best. You know, for $2,000, you can go to Intel and they will give you the best processor available to consumers. And then for AMD, they came in and they were like, give us $500 to $600 and we'll give you the best processor for $500 to $600. Looks like they're trying to do that again, but this time they're coming in with a 7 nanometer. I think this one's 10 to 20 core, 10 to 20 core processor. And really, I mean, like just like the graphics card, we're going to have to wait for the benchmarks, but it just goes to show that AMD has been putting a lot of effort into at least research and development, maybe not, you know, ray tracing, but shrinking these chip sizes and these die sizes is something that, you know, Intel and NVIDIA have been struggling with. And for AMD to do it, you know, to do both at the same time, pretty incredible.
Yeah, I think it's nice to see. I mean, I just upgraded my system to a 9900K, but looking at the Ryzen, I would have been getting probably the 3850X, the Ryzen 9, to kind of compete with the 9900. I just have just wanted to stay with Intel and not go to AMD. I've got a second rendering box that's Ryzen based on the second generation. That thing screams through rendering without a doubt. But that was a consideration where a year ago I wouldn't have even considered AMD. I would have gone straight to Intel.
So a pretty interesting point here is that you know, with new chip sizes in a lot of cases, and you know, we're going to run into this with Intel because Intel also announced a 10 nanometer instead of 7, a 10. And what happened was that sometimes when these big shifts happen, you know, shrinking die sizes, like with processors, that hasn't happened for 4 to 5 years, I think. You know, we went from like 18 or 20 or whatever it was down to 14. It's been 5 or 6 years. One cool thing with AMD that they did here was that if you have a 7 nanometer and you have a motherboard from within the last year or two, they're compatible. You don't have to buy a completely new system if you decide to go with the 7 nanometer, which you'd think you would because, you know, this is such a different chip. But no, they made it compatible with, you know, with a lot of people's newer systems. So I thought that was pretty cool too.
Yeah, kudos to AMD. I think they were very conscious of the budget friendly approach to doing it, and that's again, you know, going back to their video cards, that's really where they shine the most, is great performance for really good price. But with the Ryzens, they've been kind of topping some of the charts as well. So that's great to see from AMD, because again, it sort of lit a fire under Intel a while ago when the Ryzen first broke through with all the cores that it has. And so it's good to see that continue. I'd love to see what the real world performance is going to be with the new Ryzen 9 series.
So I think Intel still needs a fire lit under them. I mean, we just had Intel on the show not about 2 months ago, but they still need a fire lit under them. And it's because you know, we're going to switch topics here to the 9900K that you just got, which is, I think, the top of the line Intel that they sell to consumers right now.
Correct.
Yeah, so it's one of their best, but at the same time, I have already complained about their naming scheme and the fact that they're dropping hyperthreading as if it were a premium feature for a lot of their chips and a lot of their, kind of the i9s I'm sorry, you can only get hyperthreading with the i9. Now the i7, the i5, none of them have hyperthreading. So I'm not a fan of that. Whereas AMD, all they do is cores. All they do is hyperthreading. All they do is cores. They're 2040. They're 1836. They're pretty incredible. But it's again that deviation from Intel that they do. So
yeah, I agree. I think the future is in having multiple parallel cores running. That's where you'll see the most performance gains. But be that as it may, a lot of software right now still doesn't take advantage of having lots and lots of cores, and it still relies on just a couple of threads running as fast as they can. So in the kind of work that I do, yeah, the more cores the better, because you can push renders faster doing it that way. But when I switch to just playing a game, or indeed a lot of the in-app functions with the 3D work I do relies on just the one core and the two threads that it has running.
Yeah.
So then it becomes about clock speed. So I think there's more headroom to be had for more cores, and I think that's the way to go. But software really needs to catch up better to that.
It's that it's that classic chicken egg thing. People who design video games and programs, they can't always rely on people having 8 available cores, so they don't design games for that. But hey, the more AMD pushes it, the more people who will have access to it, and the more comfortable they'll be to do that kind of thing. And just kind of to solidify your point one more time, I will say that we received a review laptop. This was years ago. We've received a review laptop, and it was when Intel's i7 first came out. And they were like, "Hey, we'd like to send you this laptop with an i7 in it to review." No one out there will ever find the review for that thing because we never published it. The initial i7, they put the lowest price point one. It was 8 core, 16 hyper-threaded, whatever the original i7 was, but the individual core speed was about 1.8 gigahertz. And even back then, I think 3 was about the average for kind of what you want for video games and things like that. And to have, and to have 16 cores, but to have, you open up a program and you see 4 of them max out immediately and everything start lagging. It's, the balance was not struck properly there. And you really do want plenty of extra threads, but at the same time, good individual clock speed. So,
yeah, without a doubt. And I echo the concern you have with the AT&T the Intel naming with the i9 and the i7 and the hyper-threading. And even more so, the version of the Intel chips that don't have the onboard GPU, they're not that much cheaper, if at all, and there's hardly any benefit to getting the non-GPU versions. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. That I think what has struck me is a more budget-conscious place to be. So I'm not sure what they're up to there, marketing-wise.
Maybe that one, and I could just say that sometimes you talk to your customers, and Intel's customers are also massive, your Dells and your massive PC manufacturers. Maybe they wanted to save, $50 on every processor, $30 on every processor, and hey, just kind of do it. But hey, with that being said, but with that being said, that's speculation. And why don't we go ahead and flip over to something you've had hands-on with, and let's go ahead and just kind of give us a background why you decided to, why now was the time to upgrade to the 9900K. And I got to warn you, you should be able to hear the music in about a minute, but we're about to go into break. So just give an introduction. Why did you decide to upgrade?
I wanted a faster computer, and I've been waiting for the new die size for a while. And I just figured at this point, the 9900K is a good chip. It's a little overpriced, but it was time to move up to another motherboard and another system, and hand me down what I've got to my son so he can have a better gaming rig. So that was the major impetus behind doing that.
Very altruistic, so that you had to upgrade so that he could upgrade. That's definitely the way to do it.
I did it for my son, purely.
Of course. So and like I said, when we come back here, it should be playing here any second now. But when we come back, we're going to continue on with Dariush, and we're going to talk about his experience with the 9900K, because I recall for a long time there was the fact that actually I need to actually hit. There we go. So there was a time there where 5 gigahertz was only capable through nitrous oxide, or like super cooling, and it was at enthusiast level and tournaments and things like that. But hey, you now have a chip that can do that. So
everyone have it, yeah.
Yep. So everyone, we'll be right back. More Dariush, more Computer America right after this. Everyone, stay tuned.
Greece is cheap.
But the airfare costs a fortune.
Paris?
Not much closer, and again, airfare...
What about Puerto Vallarta?
Let's face it, flying anywhere is just too expensive.
Wait, what's this? Low-cost airlines.
With one call to low-cost airlines, you'll drastically slash your travel costs. We're talking insanely low airline prices to any of your favorite destinations. Where would you like to go? London, Rome, Costa Rica, Australia?
Wow, that's cheap.
So why wait? Call now to learn how crazy cheap it is to fly anywhere in the U.S. or international. Our prices are so low, we can't publish them. The only way to get them is to call to instantly hear the most amazing best deals on airline travel. It's that easy. So call now and start packing.
800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. That's 800-215-4461.
We are all Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, a group of locals banded together to create positive change. We took animals into our homes, held adoption events at local retailers, and talked to the community about our mission to help build a no-kill Asheville. A decade later, we have achieved so many victories for animals in need. There's been so much progress, yet there's still so much to do. As part of our year-long celebration, we encourage you to become a member of our special Compassionate Circle program. With a monthly donation of $10 or more, you will have behind-the-scenes access to the work we are doing at Brother Wolf. Our goal is to reach 1,000 members because we receive no government funding. Working together, we can help build and sustain no-kill communities. Learn more at compassionatecircle.bwar.org. We are a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.
And welcome back to the Computer America Show. It is 32 minutes past the hour as we continue on here. And everyone, if you missed any part of our conversation so far with Dariush, we covered a lot for sure. And although looking at our list of topics, not enough. But I will say it's been a lot of fun. And feel free to check out the podcast. It's today's show in its entirety, rebroadcast wherever podcasts are heard. So, okay. Now, with that being said, we continue on. Dariush Derakhshani, our computer graphics expert, and we were just about to get into why he decided to, or at least, well, he said, he got tired of waiting. And Dariush, I know that a lot of people probably share your same sentiment, because everyone was waiting that, if you buy into kind of, let's say, if this started with like the 6700K, I think was like the first one of this generation. If you bought into this generation early, you usually wait till the next generation to buy in. But this one has gone on for a number of years, so you got antsy, and I'm sure a lot of people did too. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I had a 6700K in my system, 2.5 or 3 years, give or take. So really, I didn't super duper need one, but my son was on the old i7 860. Mm-hmm. Although he has a Titan X card, but he's got a full VR setup, and you know, some things were dragging back a little bit, so that was definitely a consideration. I did want the smaller die size. I wanted the next generation, but 9900 had a good clock speed, good number of cores. Again, I think it was about $100 more than it should be. Yeah. I bought it for $530. I think the pricing was when it first debuted. So I'd rather it be cheaper, but I do a lot of work, and I do need something to stay zippy. So I figured I didn't want to wait another year or two. So I jumped on it, and I figured the next generation, I'm going to wait and probably 2 to 3 more years before I update again.
You say that, but and this is, you know, more than graphics cards, but to CPUs and processors. One thing that really happens with processors, you know, when we talk about the smaller chip size and less electricity, that means, of course, less heat. Less heat means you can, you know, put more electricity through it, which means that you can get better performance. And hey, that means that the next gen ideally should be quite, you know, like a good 20-30%. So far, every generation Intel has come out with. This generation has been a 10, 15, 20% upgrade. Hopefully a bigger upgrade for the next one. But yeah, you know, you won't be sad with a 9900K. I think, you know, this is something that Craig, you know, used to say all the time, and, you know, we really prescribe to. Spend as much money as you can budget, and it's going to last you longer. That's just the way it is. So, you know, it's not about waiting for the next thing. It's not about waiting for XYZ. It's just when you need it, spend the money, and you'll be good to go for quite a while. So
yeah, I agree. And it's not like I'm noticing a day and night difference between what I had and what I have now. If anything, there's a constancy between what I used to expect and what I'm getting now with the i9. It is, you know, when I've done some benchmarking, certainly is faster than the old i7 that I had.
Right.
So it's not like immediately I'm in a faster car all of a sudden that I can notice that my acceleration is crazy. So it's a new platform. I like the new motherboard I've got. It's a Asus Z390. It's got a good chipset on it. It's solid. Everything's working fine. So it feels more like a lateral move over than it does like a move up. Like when I went from my old i7 to the 6700K, that was a pretty noticeable improvement. Yeah. Or even when I went from the Core Duo that I used to have to the i7 860, that was a really big jump. But I suspect some of my rendering speeds will definitely be faster. And yeah, it's just same case, same everything else. Everything fit in, just a new memory. I've got 48 gigs of RAM in this one, and then that's about it. Just
that's that's kind of the case though with you know, with 10% upgrade, where, you know, it's like, yeah, it's nice to have, but it's not going to be a game changer.
Right.
You know, although between 60 or 600K to the 9900K, you're probably looking at, I don't know, probably 30% across all the benchmarks and what have you. But hey, you know, you did it, and it's going to stave off obsolescence for quite a while. And like you said way at the beginning, Moore's Law is lagging behind a bit. So, you know,
absolutely,
it's going to last longer.
And I have to note that upgrading a computer is a lot easier now. Windows 10 seems to be much more forgiving when you're dropping in. And I was planning on doing a clean install of Windows 10 anyway, but my M.2 drive that had my old Windows 10 installation, it booted up fine with the old install. I mean, I had an Asus board before, but all the drivers, everything was fine. I ended up erasing and clean installing anyway, but I was really surprised.
So yeah, and for anyone out there who's not really familiar with why surprised, Windows does a couple things to make sure it's not counterfeit. You know, make sure you're not, you know, kind of just swapping your OS for a completely new computer because they want you to buy a new one. Whenever you replace a big piece of hardware like a motherboard or a processor, they usually say, new phone, who dis, or whatever the meme is. And, they say, we don't recognize the hardware. This is not a legitimate copy of Windows anymore. You got to buy a new one. So they didn't do that too, which is nice.
And usually you get a lot of blue screen of deaths when trying to boot up with an old install with new hardware. I bought a license, so that all was fine. It's just I was super amazed that chipset drivers and the boot order and everything just it worked.
That's good.
I hadn't seen that sort of ease since upgrading OS X on a Mac, where everything stayed put.
But that is much more complicated for Windows, obviously, because you have so many different manufacturers, hardware. Apple controls its own ecosystem.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. So I was pleased to see that working fine.
But I think with that being said, we are going to switch topics a little bit and, get into the meat of the RTX 2060. And then we're going to start, kind of flying through topics here because we're, kind of running out of time. But I did want to get into the 2060. This is Intel's attempt to, kind of where you said AMD likes to hang out, which is the mid-range, mid-range price, good performance, value. And, the NVIDIA 2080, 2070, 2080 Ti, the Titan cards, those are all the top end. Those are all, if you have more money than sense, then you're going to go for it.
Right.
That kind of thing. So the 2060 is NVIDIA's attempt to kind of swing back into the territory of the mid-range. So what do you think about this? They announced this at CES, and this is more moderate. More people are definitely going to buy this than the other cards.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, just like with their old naming nomenclature, the 960, 970, 980, and so on, 1060, 1070, 1080, and so on. The 2060 is the lower priced, and it's $350 is a really good price for a ray tracing card, and that's where the 20 comes in. The 2060 is the ray tracing version. They have a 1660, which is the non-ray tracing version, which is even cheaper for those on a bigger budget that don't want ray tracing. But I don't recommend it.
I pay attention to this stuff pretty good, probably more than most people because this is my day job. But I had not even heard of this of the 1660 or whatever the heck they're calling it. That's a completely new card to me.
Yeah, they have so this chipset that they're working on this generation's Turing chipset. Mm-hmm. So there's the GTX 1060 Ti, which is based on that Turing chipset, which the 2060 and those other cards are based on. But the 1660 ends up being basically the same as the 2060, but without the dedicated ray trace cores, which should bring the cost down for people who don't want to spend that kind of money to get ray tracing. But I don't think so. I really think ray tracing is the way to go. Maybe it's a little too early because a lot of games don't support it yet. So maybe this might be the last line of non-ray tracing cards that you should consider.
It's definitely,
but the 1660 comes in with some pretty good specs.
Yeah, and just real quick, I mean, it definitely breaks or I guess bucks the trend of the naming. Kind of the 2080, the 1080, the 980. This is now 16. And it's it's somewhere in the middle. Like you said, it's missing some of the key, I guess, kind of engineering or software, or whatever that the 20s do. This is definitely a middle child, and I can see why they didn't make a big hubbub about this. It's probably for people who don't have any ray tracing in their arsenal, and they just want something a bit more affordable to compete with AMD. So clearly everything else is aimed at ray tracing. So, it's not like they're going to have two different lines, but this seems like a middle child.
Yeah, I think so. And again, this is leaked information online. So it's not, it's nothing that's official. It's probably more likely why you haven't heard. But this is just like fresh off the internet. And these are leaked benchmarks. So who knows if it's going to be called a 1660? Who knows if it's going to be out and have a TI version and all that kind of stuff? We don't know. But it seems like they are, NVIDIA is I don't want to say hedging their bets because that's not the right phrase, but they're being smart about catering to ray tracing and non-ray tracing people who don't want to jump on that bandwagon. But again, I can't say this enough. I think ray tracing is absolutely the next step. And as soon as more gaming platforms embrace it, the more standard this is going to become.
And I think more to that point, I mean, it's just all the top end cards and everything else other than this one had ray tracing. Like this generation was the first generation that was like, hey, ray tracing is the thing. You guys need to learn the term and we are going to do it for you. This is the first time I'm hearing any kind of, kind of baby step up to the next generation. So, yep, they're definitely going to push it. This is, I wouldn't doubt it. This thing came in. Actually, I'll ask you first. How much would you think a card like this would be? Because NVIDIA, just like a lot of Intel's processors, but NVIDIA has been getting very aggressive with their pricing, very high with their pricing. What do you think something like a 1660 would look like?
If the 2060 is coming in at about 350, I really think the non-ray trace version should be at 300 or right below, like 299. That would make sense, a $50 difference, because if it's really any less than, if it was a $30 difference between the two, I would spend the extra $30 and get the card with ray tracing, even though none of my games support it yet. So I would think it would need to be at least a $50 gap to make the 1660 kind of stand on its own. Now, it is a TI, so maybe it has better performance than the 2060 would have non-TI. So who knows?
There's and of course TI indicates that there could potentially be just and we'll know about this next month. The article that I'm looking at here says that they might launch this in February of this year. But if there's a TI, then there's a possibility of a 1660 non-TI, which would be even less expensive. And NVIDIA just they like. I feel like in a lot of cases, if you wanted budget, like if you wanted to go I have like $200 to spend on a graphics card, your options were to go to third-party websites and buy the previous generation graphics cards.
Yeah.
That was always NVIDIA's kind of line of reasoning. They weren't really interested in going much lower than their than their 1060s, their 1050s. That was about the lowest they go. So maybe the 1660 is like this generation's like 1050. You know what I mean? It's something even lower than kind of what they recommend. But interesting rumors. And you also included a video. We'll throw this up in the show notes as well of a 2060 review. Just to kind of get hands on, see some benchmarks, and so very interesting. Okay. So with that being said, processor, graphics card, AMD, NVIDIA, Intel, all coming out with some very interesting things at CES. But to kind of more what we've been talking about with ray tracing, I wanted to take some of these articles that you sent over from GraphicsPeak and a John Petty research publication. It's been about 3 months since we had John Petty on the show. We should talk to him. But yeah, so very good guys. They do a lot of a lot of good research, and I was actually pretty interested in this one because I'm kind of like a fish. I see something shiny and gold, and I think I got to see what that is. And you have this you have this article here, and then there were 21 free ray tracing programs. This is very important because when it comes to designing content or making content, I guess if the only ray tracing applications out there were coming from big name studios, large publications, and only the AAA game studios, then there just wouldn't be enough reason to really go out and get ray tracing. But I'm hoping, and admittedly, I'm just kind of thinking about the title here. if this is available to more studios, more indie developers, or smaller games, then hey, a lot more programs are going to take advantage of this really cool technology. So I'm hoping that that's what this is.
Yeah, I would hope so as well. The more of this technology that's out there, even in the public domain, the more of it that's available, the more you can see it being incorporated into products that are being put out for consumers. So I think that's a good thing. And then getting these to work in VR is something we've talked about before. Getting ray tracing to real time in VR would be, or I should say AR, would be pretty amazing. So it's good to see that there's a lot of development out there, and lots of people are interested in developing ways to ray trace and standalone renderers like that. I've been ray tracing for a long time in CG. So if you are already a 3D content developer, you already know, and you probably already have your favorite ray tracing renderer already, like V-Ray, for example, or Redshift. So it's nice to see that these are making a broader sort of appeal.
Right. And you know, looking through some of the product images here, you know, you can kind of see some examples of these free software. And, you know, don't get me wrong, you can still kind of tell it's, you know, well, at least in these examples, they're a bit, like, I don't know, lower quality renders with the buildings and things like that. But at the same time, they do have some, you know, interesting details where they mention that the sky is the light source, and therefore you get things like trees casting shadows and, you know, the buildings having shadows on them that I would guess would just be, you know, kind of the press of a button, and it would throw in real, you know, kind of real life shadows. So yeah, pretty, you know, pretty cool stuff. And obviously you hope to see more of it, and you hope to see it in, you know, things that you can buy. So
absolutely.
I have not mentioned AR at all, but augmented reality and real-time shading, or I'm sorry, real-time, wow, holy cow. Real-time ray tracing. Ooh, there we go. With AR would be very impressive, because then you could have things that look physically there, but, you know, obviously aren't. So, okay.
Absolutely.
So with that being said, they mentioned that that's available for free. Nebula, I believe, is the product name. And yeah, it's free until you make $100,000. But then, hey, you know, you made $100,000. Why not pay for it?
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty cool of them. So with that being said, there's that one, and then there's this other one we'll touch on real quick, and then we'll move on to monitors to cap off the conversation. Actually, was that it? Yes. So, okay. Benchmarking ray tracing. So with the 2080 Ti Founders Edition, 2070, 2060, I'm sure AMD is going to start claiming that they can do it on theirs as well. Benchmarking ray tracing, is that going to be a thing, or is that just kind of like, you know, just, is that going to be noticeable enough to actually benchmark, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, I think so. I think I mean, we've got all these 3D gaming benchmarks from PC Mark, for example. So ray tracing should become a component of that. I've been using V-Ray benchmark to kind of get some speed comparisons between some of the cards I've been testing out. I've got a few older generation Nvidia Quadro professional cards that I've been benchmarking in this new 9900K setup. And one of my go-to benchmarks has been this V-Ray, which does a GPU ray tracing render as well as a CPU ray tracing render, and gives you the time for that. And I think that's something that we should hopefully see more of, is being able to gauge the frames per second based on a ray trace scene. I'd love to see that worked into existing 3D game benchmarks that I've also used. So I think that should be more common as the RTX cards and hopefully others from like AMD start using real-time ray tracing.
So, and this obviously makes sense because, sometimes when you play video games, you'll load up a scene, you'll come out of a cutscene, or you'll load something, and you see kind of like the basic textures and everything, and then everything starts to populate with, the higher quality stuff, the higher res stuff. And when we say real-time ray tracing, gamers are a picky lot. I'm sure a lot of people are pickier than they think they are. 40 milliseconds loading time for ray tracing, you're going to notice a difference. So I guess how real time is going to matter when it comes to hardware, is something more real time than something else. So the software has to optimize for it as well. So I say real time with air quotes. Real time is the goal, and how well they actually accomplish the goal, that's going to be the difference. So with that being said, we have like 5 minutes, and I wanted to touch on these. We found this article from Digital Trends, a great publication, and they had a bunch of gaming monitors, and I didn't want to do just strictly gaming because CES, admittedly it's fun. CES is more than just gaming. It's a lot. But with that being said, the first monitor we have here is actually from Razer. And Razer, they've made the Razer Blade. I always like that name. They made a laptop, so they've done monitors before, but this is their first standalone kind of desktop monitor. And how I think we're going to do this, we're going to name the monitor. We're going to describe what it looks like. We're going to say, some of the key features of it, and then I'm going to ask your reaction. Are you interested? Would you, who would you recommend this for? And I think the first one is pretty obvious. 27-inch. So that's think of like the best iMac you can get. Yeah, this thing's huge. 144 hertz refresh rate monitor. No sign of resolution, so I'm betting it's just your 1080p monitor. But Razer Chroma RGB lighted, very stylish. What do you think about this one? Because this one was actually one of the more talked about monitors.
I'd like to know what kind of panel it takes. For me, I'm less concerned with the millisecond switching speed that gamers are interested in. I'm more so for the color accuracy, and for that I really want to see IPS panels as opposed to like a TN panel instead. Right. So that would be the first thing that I'm looking for, to see what kind of panel this is and how its color reproduction is going to stack up. I think this is probably going to be more geared for speed and frame rates and refresh rates. So
this might mean something to you. Doesn't mean anything to me, but covers 95% of DCI P3 color gamut and maxed out at 420 nits of brightness. So it's not 95%. Sounds like it's not 100%. So probably not the most color accurate.
Potentially, those percentages can be definitely misleading. So some really good panels, it depends on the color space and how much they cover. So I'm not entirely sure. I'd like to see, is it 10-bit? Does it cover that? I don't think there's enough information out yet on it.
Nope, not yet with that, but like you said, mainly towards gamers. So there's that one. The next one, this is not just towards gamers, but the Lenovo ThinkVision P44W, ultra wide. So think of two monitors right next to each other, but fused into a singular screen. Resolution 3840, so 4K by 1200. So not true 4K, just extremely ultra wide. And again, this is actually probably going to take us through the end of the show, but more to just put the question to you. What do you think about these ultra wides? Because they were, Lenovo had one, LG had one. A lot of people had them. What do you think about ultra wides?
I like them. I had a chance to review an HP curved ultra wide, and it was also 4K across, but not 4K vertically. So it wasn't real true 4K. It was really good for like editing and things like that, because you've got a nice wide screen. You can stack things side by side and not have to worry about going from one screen to another. I thought that was really good. For the kind of work that I like to do, I'd like to see a full 4K vertically as well. But I think this is super appealing. The chance that I got to play Rainbow Six on that ultra wide Oh, awesome. It was definitely pretty awesome.
Yeah, for video games, when you have this ultra wide resolution, the games are actually nice enough to, instead of putting black bars, they actually increase your field of view or your field of vision, and it's a very enjoyable kind of experience. And by the way, just to touch on one more thing, the LG 49-inch ultra wide. So as much as the the Lenovo was, I think they put it here as something like. I don't even know the exact specs, but this one was even bigger. This one looks like 3 monitors stacked side by side into a singular monitor. So this one has an aspect ratio of 32 by 9 with 5,120 by 2160. So this one is that 4K vertically, but even more than 4K horizontally.
Yeah, this is exactly 2 4K monitors side by side. That's where you get 32 by 9, because a typical single monitor is 16 by 9. So this is exactly having 2 monitors side by side fused together. So, and it does cover 4K vertically with 2160. So this looks like a complete winner as far as I'm concerned with what I'm looking for, being able to have 4K video content playing on one side of your screen, and then all your palettes and work windows on the other side. So this is a super intriguing monitor, and I would love to see this. This seems to cover more color space than the Razer that you talked about. So I believe this might actually be a 10-bit. Whether it's dithering 10-bit or full 10-bit remains to be seen. But this is something that I would love to get my hands on and keep forever.
So with that being said, LG, if you're listening, we'd love to send one out to Dariush for him to test for you. He's very, very fair, and depending on how much you pay him, he will write glowing reviews. Joking, of course, he doesn't do that. So, Dariush, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, really sharing your expertise with us in this so much news, and thank you.
My pleasure.
Until next month, hey, looking forward to seeing you again.
Take care. Thank you for having me. Take care.
Our pleasure. Have a great one. Bye-bye. Everyone else out there, thank you for joining us here on Computer America. Great show. And of course, as always, feel free to check out the show where, if you missed any part of it, check out the podcast, check out the show notes. And until next time, everyone, have a great day. 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. Catch you next time. Bye-bye.